Welcome back. The government has announced new funding of £31 million to try and protect our democratic processes, including enhancement of security measures for locally elected representatives.
Well, let's go to the Police, Crime and Fire Minister. That's Chris Philp. Chris, good morning to you. How serious is all of this, and how dangerous and increasingly dangerous do you believe it is being a public representative? Good morning.
Good morning. We take it very seriously indeed. It's vital for democracy that elected representatives, members of parliament and others can discharge their duties without fear or intimidation. If MPs can't do their jobs and use their judgment without any sort of external intimidation, then democracy itself can't function. And we're concerned because we've seen incidents recently where that line has been crossed. We've seen a Member of Parliament, Mike Freer's constituency office subject to an arson attack. We've seen a Member of Parliament, Tobias Ellwood, prevented from going to his own home by a large mob of protesters outside his private house. And just last Friday, we saw an incident in Stoke where a party-political fundraising event had to be abandoned because not only were protesters outside, but some got inside as well and started harassing the people who had attended the event. And in fact, 4 people in relation to that incident have now rightly been arrested by Staffordshire police. So those are just 3 examples just from the last few weeks. That's why we're announcing today an extra £31 million of funding to help protect not just members of Parliament, but also councillors, mayors, police and crime commissioners as well, when it comes to the election later in this year, candidates, because for democracy to function, elected representatives and candidates have to be able to speak their mind, vote according to their conscience and their beliefs without any kind of intimidation, and that's why we're taking these steps.
It's a sad indictment of where British politics has got to, isn't it? How hatred has crept in. Do you feel some sympathy for Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who oversaw what a lot of people saw as a bit of a farce in the Commons last week because of concerns over MP safety? And do you share the views of the 86 MPs now who've now signed a motion of no confidence in him? He's in a very difficult and precarious position regarding his future. Or do you blame it on Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't think the government is taking a position on the EDM, but I do think that that Lindsay Hoyle made a very serious misjudgment, because no one in public life, whether that's the Speaker of the House of Commons or Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, should be giving in to intimidation or pressure. The moment anyone gives in to intimidation or threats or pressure, which is essentially what Keir Starmer and Lindsay Hoyle did last week, then you are sort of ceding the ground on which democracy stands. So it was a terrible, terrible misjudgment. I think he's probably recognised that himself now. But that is one of the reasons why we're taking these steps. We want all MPs of all parties, whatever their views are, to be able to express those views, to vote and to speak without any sort of fear or intimidation, because without that, democracy can't function. Now, I think those seeking to intimidate are a tiny minority, but we don't want a tiny minority to coerce or intimidate democratically elected representatives, whether that's in Parliament, local councils, mayors, police and crime commissioners, or candidates for public office.
Should stop lying to people.
Lee Anderson spoke his mind, didn't he? And he paid the price for it within the Conservative Party. Is there a way back for him into the Conservatives and the many thousands of people who get in touch with this programme every day? Or is it really the end of the sort of right-wing members of the party? And is Reform going to mop up all of those votes at the next election? We're hearing, aren't we, that is very close to being announced that Lee Anderson will be joining Reform.
Well, your first question, that's really a matter for the Prime Minister. I think what he said was wrong, as you've probably discussed a great deal over the last few days. But in relation to your question about...
there is still confusion about that.
Well, look, I think it's not the, conflating the whole Muslim community with Islamists is wrong. What he said about Sadiq Khan I don't think was true. There's a lot to criticise in Sadiq Khan. He's a terrible mayor of London. He's presided over an increase in knife crime just recently, whereas in the rest of the country, knife crime has gone down. Sadiq Khan's record on crime is terrible.
Bullshit!
It's terrible on public transport. The ULEZ scheme is a disaster. But what Lee Anderson said wasn't true, and I don't think was something people in responsible positions actually should say. But on reform, look, a vote for reform is effectively a vote for the Labour Party, because it will simply let Labour win. And having Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, putting up taxes, weak on borders, no plan on anything, is bad for Britain, bad for the country. And a vote for reform, unfortunately, will simply let Labour in. And I would say to anyone considering doing that, just think it's a choice. It's a choice between the Conservatives with a plan. The small boat crossings are down 36%, for example. Inflation is down to 4% and falling. There is a plan and it's working. The alternative is...
Thank you very much indeed.
Plan.
Right, we'll say goodbye to the Minister there and his friend behind him there who deserves... What does he deserve?
Well, it certainly deserves an apology for the language that he just put out on air. Obviously nothing to do with us. And, it plays into this whole thing about intimidation.
Yeah.
There is an elected member of Parliament talking to people via the airwaves, a legitimate way of practising democracy, and he is trying to intimidate and influence that discussion. Unacceptable, and we do apologise.